sense of soul.
Hey Soul Seekers, it's Shanna. Journey with me to discover how people around the world awaken to their true sense of soul. Now go grab your coffee. Open your mind, heart, and soul.
It's time to awaken.
Today on Sense of Soul, we have New York Times-bestselling author Laura Day. She has spent nearly 4 decades helping individuals, organizations, and companies harness and develop their innate, intuitive abilities to create profound change. Laura's work has helped demystify intuition and bring it into the mainstream. In her newest book, Prism, 7 Steps to Heal Your Past and Transform, she provides a transformational program to heal your past, remake your present, and create the future you deserve. And she's with us today. Please welcome Laura Day. I'm excited to hear about your book, The Prism, and I really look forward to it. It sounds like it's a program for people.
Everything I do is a workshop because I think when you talk about something, people don't get it. But when they do something and it creates a change, then they get it. And so every book I've ever written is experiential. Really, one of the differences in this book is that you can do it as a program. So you can say, I'm going to remake myself. I'm going to take this week and I'm going to really do an intensive, which I've done before with the Prism. When I just don't like, when so many things in my life are going wrong that I just need a real refresh, if I have a week, I take it and I really dedicate myself. But it's also made so that you can say, oh, I'm having a problem in my relationship, or I'm having a problem with finances, or I'm having a problem at work. Let me just skip everything and go to the piece that addresses it so that I can use it right now. So it's made to be both a real revamp and an emergency resuscitation device.
So, you know what? I love this because I have found right now in my journey that everything I've been going through, healing in the inside, is actually helping me to deal with some of the chaos that we're dealing with right now, like in the world.
In a way, I have a slightly different perspective in my work because I have never been focused on these are internal changes. Any internal change should create an external change. You are a prism, you take the energy and you create your world. So if you change inside, actually the proof is what goes on outside of you, what you're able to create or manifest. People love that word. I think that's very true, and it's a very positive way to do something. If you perfect yourself and your life still isn't working, you don't have a work you love, you don't have a partner you love, you don't have a home you love, things are a struggle every day, then not so great to be perfect in that situation.
Wow, I love that different aspect. Thank you for that. So, tell me about the prism.
So the prism is really a structure that every single human being has. And it's broken up into 7 parts, and it follows our endocrine system. It's actually a very logical system where the physical parts that it's broken up into in our body, not just the parts that reflect on our life, are the parts that not only physically construct us, construct our experience physiologically, but they also allow us to connect with the world in a way that creates outcome. Because of course we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, but the important part of that isn't that we're spiritual beings. The important part of that is that we're having a physical experience, and we really do need to do it well. I've been teaching for over 40 years, and I see how our early patterning, so our early prism formation, creates a really hard life in many ways. And life is too hard for too many people. It's so important to master that, even more than it's incredible how we, school ourselves in math and science and geography. and not on how to use that incredible being that we are.
Especially like our intuition. How do you feel about that? Because I feel like that's not something that was nourished in me as a child. I wish someone would have said, trust that feeling.
I don't, what intuition is it's your ability to know anything, to perceive anything with all five of your senses at any point in time, from any perspective. Children are born undifferentiated, so they are intuitive. They just don't have a prism, an ego, so they can't do anything with it. They can't express it. They can't be aware of it. You have to be separate from something in order to perceive it or have impact on it. So, so I think what would be an ideal educational system is that we're born, we get good ego examples and ego formation, good prism formation, so that our centers can know and create and evolve. But that intuition is directed, and in an ideal ego formation, intuition is directed toward really the consensus reality, not going beyond it. So the rules, how to get along with people, how to be useful. It's the development part. You'll see that each part of your development and your healing is broken up into 3 stages. It's the development part is the early intuition. Only after you are developed as an ego, as an I, as a fully distinct human being, should you be able to merge with the rest of reality again, because otherwise it's confusing. And what we find with people who are damaged like that, who are too open intuitively, they don't have it structured in their prism early enough, what we find is that they don't function in the world. They have lots of information and feelings, and they're very mobile, but they can't do anything with it.
Oh my goodness, I can totally relate to that. Yes. So, how do we bring our sixth sense or our intuition is that what you consider the sixth sense to be? Is
I
that
don't see
intuition?
it as a sixth sense. I
Okay.
mean, I really think the sixth sense is the gestalt of all of the senses in intellect, in what makes us uniquely thoughtful. But really, intuition is all of your 5 senses: hearing, taste,
Mhm.
sight, feeling, smell. But you as a being can move in time and space. Your perceptions, those senses can move. So it's really an extension of your 5 senses and
Mhm.
not a sixth sense. And it does, the wonderful thing about intuition is that you are your early programming. It took place, genetically at conception, and then really you were done and dusted by age 7. The rest is all reformation. So you can't be different. You don't see a world different than what it is you were raised with in those first 7 years. What intuition does when we encourage it, and it shouldn't be encouraged as early as 7 to 18, for example. We're still learning the rules then. But the thing that intuition does as adults is when we have a goal, it will pull in, if we train it a little bit, those out of the blue people, experiences, and perceptions that hit us hard enough to derail some of our habits and patterns. And once you do that, you open up a whole new world. I just wrote an article on how even changing the color of your shirt
Mhm.
actually completely changes who's aware of you, what you encounter, how you feel about yourself, even your neurology and physiology. It's incredible. And we don't work with those changes. And that's what the prism is about. It's about those tiny changes. We all think we have to do massive changes, and massive changes often make big messes. It's like, let's try a different flour in this recipe. No, that's a massive change. You may end up with goop. How about cooking it 2 minutes less or 2 minutes more, or letting it sit? They're tiny changes that actually are really the changes that make enormous changes in our life.
Wow. And I feel like myself and many people are so afraid of that change, which is natural. And it's,
Well, as mammals, we're hardwired to be afraid of change, but I think that people are afraid of change, but they're also afraid of never becoming who they could have become,
true.
never having the love they could have had, never being acknowledged and rewarded for what they put into the world. Never having a home they love. Like there's so many, we don't like change, but we also we mourn what we don't have, and all those things do take change. So I think a lot of it is reframing what change is. I just did a post that I haven't posted yet about how anxiety and excitement are actually in the body and the brain very similar things. What's different is the story we put behind them. So really the prism is about the fact that the world you want may just take a 1 degree turn of your head. You may just be, we tend to look, we studies show we find what we are looking for. You are looking for those patterns between conception and age 7, maybe not completely, depending on how much outside impact has happened in your life. But basically, we are both held together and trapped by our patterns. And that's why I write self-help, because I too was said, I have some memoir in this, and my early life was my siblings didn't survive. I'm from a family of 5 suicides. So, there really is a way that we should have experienced our formation. And luckily, as adults, we can give that to ourselves now. Self-help in many ways saved my life. So did intuition. And the thing about the prism is it really is from both intuition, what saved my life, and also the absolute grace of having thousands of students and being able to workshop something for over a decade to see what does work and what doesn't work. So the prism asks you to, it says, listen, if you had gotten what you needed to create wealth in the world, this is what it would have looked like. But you don't have to go back and figure out what went wrong. My favorite, one of my favorite phrases is, you don't have to look for your trauma. Go after something you want, and your trauma will be the first guest at your party. And then you'll deal with it because it'll be standing right in front of you, and you will find those tools. You will get self-help, you will get into communities, you will find those tools to deal with the trauma, but not by sinking back into the trauma, by going for those goals. And actually the prism starts with 3 goals, because goals contextualize your energy. Goals give a filing system for your awareness, for your efforts. They help you redefine your history, because you should definitely be the hero of your own story. And in fact, you should be the villain of your own story as well, because if it's your fault, you can fix it.
Are we talking like goals for the day, goals for, 5-year goals?
Um, the thing I don't like about 5-year goals is that you don't know if a system is working. And part of what we do in the prism is we pick goals that even as a long shot could happen soon. So let's say you're alone, you're not making enough money, and you're not healthy. 3 goals. I have an incredible partner who I'm building a wonderful life with. 1. And I have a tricky way of getting your intuition to give you information and see the future in those goals. That's 1. I have a healthy body physiologically and neurologically, and I enjoy every moment of my good health. Goal 2. And then goal 3 is everything I do is valued and rewarded. Goal 3. So those 3 goals are actually a life, and those could happen in a week. It's really, now it's not that, maybe your artwork is put in the National Museum next week, but maybe you all of a sudden notice, because you have a goal, so your viewfinder is moved. You find a street show and you think, oh, may as well do it, and you're discovered there. It's sometimes, our goals come, sometimes they're built, and sometimes actually they come out of the blue, the same way intuition does. But what the prism asks you to do is also to say, wow, these are the pieces of my development. And you can also, there's so many ways to identify it. Usually where you have illness in your body is where you also have illness in your life. You can identify it by issue. You don't have a stable home. That's a first ego center issue. And there are little tiny changes you can make. And I always say, make the change that you think is complete BS. Do that. Try that one on, as long as it's safe. As long as there's no new damage. Try it on, because that's probably the one that's going to give you the aha. That's the one that's so far outside of your box that you ridicule it. Try that one on. And then you prove it to yourself, because you notice, oh, wow, all of a sudden I haven't had a party invitation in 6 months. All of a sudden I have 3. I think big goals are put together the same way people are developed. We are a system, and those big goals are put together by us living today well, achieving our goals today. And listen, some of our goals aren't big goals. Like, I want a clean house. That's not a big goal. I'm not going to make it one of my goals. But what my other goals do is they contextualize it, because one of my goals is about work, one of my goals is about family, and one of my goals is about health. And so how I clean my house actually it empowers all of those goals. It invites people in. It's expanding my ability to help others. I found someone who really is a refugee and needs the war. I mean, just like all kinds of, it expands, it gives context to your world. But actually, my publisher, I sent some of my students who I've not met. A lot of them are just on Instagram. I put lipstick on in the morning, I do an Instagram, and they've been working on this book with me for over a decade, especially during COVID, where we really needed quick solutions. We needed magic, and we needed magic that wasn't magicalized, that wasn't complicated, quick little solutions. But when I sent them the things that my students had sent me, we did the 4th ego center, which is about value. And one person who was about to be evicted from their home, they couldn't pay their mortgage. It was about to go into a default, or had been in default, and they were about to be evicted. They got an unexpected tax return from like 5 years or 6 years prior that they hadn't applied for, that covered the amount of their mortgage. So it was like not the whole mortgage, the back payments and the current payment. So it was like, and my publisher said, no one's going to believe, like, we can't put this in. No one will believe it. But that's how the prism works. And not because the prism is magical. The prism is you. It is how you are built. It's because you are your magic wand. You have access to everything. You are intuitive. You can make connections. You can change.
So how deep are you going when we're talking about, healing that trauma of the past? Sometimes these are patterns that have been passed down for generation after generation after generation. And this is one thing that I've noticed, but I did notice that once I was able to kind of confront them, bring them to awareness, and just at least even know that they were there, I saw a difference like in my mom.
Yes, that, we're part of a system, which is why when you make a change, your world changes as well, your family changes as well. I think that where I have a little bit of bias on traditional trauma work is I actually think that it's much more productive to work on goals and take trauma as what is going to show up that we deal with. We don't pretend it's not there, but we deal with it. So, for example, I had a manic depressive mother. I sometimes, when she was manic, had to remind her to put clothing on before going out the door. And because of that, I think in many ways, I mean, who knows, knowing the reason it is not as important as knowing the solution. And the fact that I knew, knowing the future and saying it and not knowing you're saying it does not make you popular at a third grade lunch table. So kind of a combination of all of these things made me feel very shy in a social situation, certainly shy in getting up in front of an audience. I feel different. And I think that's what I found from my students is that's true of many, many people. But I didn't know that as a young person. When I gave birth, I had to suddenly make a living. And long story, it's in practical intuition, but I just suddenly make a living. And so I had to step on a stage. I had to be on the cover of my books. I had to go out to events. And I was blessed that, synchronistically, using the prism without knowing it, I went from not making a living to making millions of dollars in a couple of years. But the blessing was a little bit lost on me because I had bills to pay. It was all about what I needed to do. And the fact of the matter is, I had to take my defective self, myself that had not been cared for, the child who had not been cared for, the young person who had been raped, the person who really felt defective, and I had to exhibit her. And by the way, it was the most healing thing in the world because I didn't go back and I didn't even have therapy at the time. I had to step on that stage and I had to find a way to make it okay in doing it, or I wouldn't have been able to do it. In doing it, I dealt with the trauma. And the way I did it was I realized that I cared about the people in the audience. So maybe I wasn't going to be some all put together speaker, but I cared. And so I was going to do it for them. I was going to do the best I could for them. So I made it not about me. But then as I matured, I was able to be proud of me. I was able to not be a survivor of, but be someone who took everything and created this magnificent being. So I don't think you focus on the trauma. You focus on the goal. The trauma comes up. You find the tools. And that's, again, what self-help is. That's what community is. That's the way to use your friend group. I mean, I hate the thing where we just get together and chew the fat. I get together and we go at each other and we do ritual and we, because everything in life is a ritual. I want to build things. We look at each other's business plans. We say uninvited remarks about each other's children. We come up against each other so that we can get out of our patterns. I am always living the prism because I want to change and I have devoted my life to tools for change because I needed to survive and I very much care that everyone else does too. I mean, the prism actually got out of, because I held it close with me and my students, with this tiny group of people for over a decade. And it was really given to me as a gift in my childhood. It is how I survived. I just didn't have the words for it. I lived the process. It saved me I think when I had what I call my decade of sibling suicides, I think at that point I thought I was really focused on what was different for me. And I tell a story in one of these articles where I went to a psychiatrist who I occasionally see, who I think is super brilliant. But, my brother had committed suicide. Then 2 years later, my sister and I think, crazy people are always the last to know. Maybe I should go check this out. So I made an appointment and I walk in and here I am. And I'm like, well, now it's happened again, and I'm not sure I'm okay. And he looks at me and he says, "Ah, you're fine. There's always one. You had to take care of people. You found the tools. You're okay. So what else are you doing in your life?" Like, he really just put it in its place. This is not you. It's part of your history, family history, but this is not who you are. And at that point, it's funny, I didn't quite realize it before this conversation, which is why it's so wonderful to go on podcasts and have people ask you things. I think at that point, I wanted to know, what did make me survive and what wasn't I able to impart to them? And that is how I put the prism really down on paper. This thing that intuitively had saved my life before the age of 5, had helped me be more intact. And then without knowing it, I had used with students for decades. And then really realizing, wait, this is a tool I need to share, because, as a medium, and what a medium is somebody who can completely let go of any structure, which sounds very esoteric, but actually it's a psychiatric disorder, and become somebody else. So when I say I feel your pain, I mean, I actually feel your pain. And taking people out of pain is really meaningful to me. With a childhood like mine, life is challenging enough that if I were just doing it for food and a sunny day, I'm not sure how I would feel about it. I want to be useful. And I love this book. This is my last self-help book. I really feel like this takes all the work and it offers it in, the lead up is all the other work for those people who want to be teachers or who have a specific thing they want to focus on. But this really takes all the work and makes life and being so much easier. And I want to teach this, and I want to teach teachers to teach this.
Oh my goodness, I love this because it seems like you said, not only is it just for, say, your relationships, it could be for whatever your dreams are. I mean, whenever we're working on that spectrum, each one of these are like its own chakra, like a vortex of its
They
own.
follow the chakras, but the chakras are different in that they're really spiritual centers.
Mhm.
And we are here to create in the physical world all those things we judge ourselves for: creating wealth, having great sex, creating love, being healthy, being beautiful, having what we want, whatever it is we value. Everyone values something different. Like, I value relationship above everything. I have a friend who does not want a relationship. She loves her friends, but she does not want to share closet space. Never has. It's not a trauma thing. She loves her autonomy. She loves her space. But the facets of the prism are really about you as a physical being and the physical world. They're not about how you connect to the oneness, because the oneness spirit is always there. It's the particle in a wave. We're particles, but we're part of that wave. We don't need to work on being more spiritual. We're already completely 100% spirit. We do, and we're certainly seeing it these days, need to work on what we're creating in a material reality, what we're creating in our lives, how we're creating our bodies.
For one, I have experienced it literally where I was so into meditation that I forgot I had a body. And it wasn't until I got really sick where I was like, oh, shoot, I've been neglecting my body. Okay. But you're right. I mean, we're here to experience this 3D world.
And to create it. I mean, and to take the power, the totality of spirit, that oneness of energy, whether you see it through physics or you see it through, traditional spirituality, we're meant that the prism is a channel for all of that. And how do we see our channel? We see it in our bodies, our relationships. We see it in what we create in our world, the wealth you want. I mean, I see being a billionaire as an illness. It's an illness. But I also see having to, work and be exhausted as an illness too. And by the way, it's the same ego center. So it's really important that we first of all acknowledge that we are here to learn, which means we're working. This is hard work. It's ecstasy also at times. It's wonderful at times, but it's also hard work. And if you really take a moment to think about spirit, oneness, right? And think about ego, the I, the hard work for all of us for that unity of spirit is done by every single person in this world. The more we facilitate each other, the more we ourselves heal. And everyone's very up in arms about what's happening and oh my God. But the reality is, what's happening is because some people have everything. And I mean, I'm certainly guilty. I'm certainly one of those people. But some people have everything. And a lot of people have to rely on school lunches to feed their children. That is just not okay.
My dad died about 9 years ago. He literally worked himself to death. Like there was no balance there. I mean, and I just don't feel like that's living. I really don't. And I don't feel it's the purpose for us to come on and experience this world by just, working yourself to death and paying bills.
And at the other side of it, I have a lot of friends who I'm 66. They're traveling, they're shopping, they're eating. I think that's such an empty life. That's not a life I would want. I really I don't understand how that's just like being a sensory blob. We're meant to connect and interact and create. And you see this a lot in retirement where people retire and they're working harder than ever because they're joining 20 boards and they're, volunteering at the local soup kitchen, and the kids after school go to their house because their parents are at work. And there are many ways. I don't mean you necessarily have to have a job, but to not be part of the functional machinery of a world, that I just don't understand.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like my journey, it's like the more I learned, the more I wanted to share. To
Yeah.
to be honest, I was excited to tell someone. I mean, why keep it for yourself?
What you said earlier is very true, which is when you change future generations. In fact, because time is a place, not a continuum, you're even healing past generations.
Yeah, I've witnessed that in my own journey. I want to keep the traditions, but yet, some of the negative patterns, are no longer serving me.
You don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, most of organized religion terrifies me, but celebrating in community, anything, a pimple popping, celebrating it, joining in ecstasy, in acknowledgement, in support of one another, in celebrating what we can celebrate. I'm so into that. There's no holiday I won't celebrate. And there's no place I won't worship. My husband's very artsy and foodie. And all I want are the places of worship. I want to go where people have opened their hearts, where people have joined in song. I want to experience that energy, and then I want to take it out to the world and create with it. I think spiritual traditions are wonderful, and meditation, things like that are wonderful, but they're wonderful as like charging in your electric car. You want to plug it in so then you can get back in the car and go somewhere. It's fuel. And of course, when I was young, genetics were they were immutable. You were born with genetics and that was it. Now, and I never experienced that, but now we find epigenetics that actually what your great grandmother experienced changed her genes and you are still living it. And what you do changes a gene's expression, and your great grandchildren will either thank you or curse you for that change. That will be their work. And there is there's so much strength in unity and a relationship. You brought up relationships. Anything physical has a prism, has a structure. A relationship is your prism, the other person's prism, but actually the relationship has a prism of its own, just like a company has a prism of its own that has to create in the world. So it's a really interesting, quick way of evaluating. And one of the most interesting things I find, like my quickie exercise, is when something's going wrong, like I notice where I experience the difficulty in my body. And then I know how I need to respond to it. But I also notice where the difficulty is coming through for them. Their difficulty is their abundance. My difficulty is in my value, my worth, and my dignity. I can compensate for their issues with abundance. And then maybe they can do their job for my fourth ego center, which is value, worth, and dignity. And we can create something in the world of worth. But it does take doing something in a little bit of a different way than I normally do it, because I'm, as reactive as the next person. I mean, I always say people who write these books that, like I do, that have these incredible solutions for you, they don't do it because they're so evolved. They do it because they are such shit shows. They had to find the answer. And they looked and they looked, and my life has been about not how do I survive? I don't come from a family where that's worth it. How do I thrive? And I actually didn't publish this book until I felt that every area of my life was an area I was thriving in. Every facet of my prism was healed, because I feel like in many ways the messenger is also the message when you're taking a methodology out. The methodology stands alone. It works independent of the messenger. But I wanted to be worthy of taking it out and presenting it. And I really did wait until I felt like I had created the prism that I wanted in my life. And of course, when you've solved something, when you're already working on the next set of problems and the next set of goals.
It sounds like also this program, this book, does not take 10 years to get there.
It's really important in the system that you get an immediate result, because if you're not getting an immediate result, you need to work on a different part of that prism. You are dancing, and you should know when your tempo is off or when you want to change the dance altogether. I'm tango now. I'm not waltz anymore, and to change that dance, I'm going to need to change some skills. I'm going to maybe need to find new partners. I'm going to need to find new music. And the fact of the matter is, the world that you want to be in exists for you. It is reshaping a tiny part of your prism so you can connect with it.
I one time read that you have an eagle that sits on the top of a mountain and he can see miles and miles, but he can't see behind him unless he shifts. Just he has to turn to be able to see all angles.
And he also can't see him.
Ooh.
And I think that is the most important message of the prism, is you don't see what you don't see. And if you have not had your worth validated in early life, it's very hard to present it in a way that the world validates it. And yet, because you're now an adult and capable of doing something differently, a tiny change puts you in the situation where acknowledgement will come at you. And at a certain point, you'll break down and say, oh my God, maybe I am worth it. And believe me, this has been a really interesting experience for me, because I have really worked on my worth. And the amount of support that has come to me from friends, from celebrities, from the press, from clients, from the public around this system has almost made me feel unwell, because I had a very good friend who booked this incredible show with this amazing woman. And he said, I booked your flights, it's tomorrow. And my first response was, well, no, I can't get on a plane to LA tomorrow. And he was like, honey, take a breath. This is a good thing. And it was the most amazing experience. The woman was this unbelievable, grounded, warm, talented, successful, beautiful woman. I had to, in a sense, bring up a more succinct expression of this work because I live it every day. So it's really hard to pick out what's that one important thing. It's all important, just like you are all important. All of your life is important. But it was such a great experience. And it was hard for me because I like being in the giving position. The receiving position makes me feel incredibly vulnerable and, kind of like a burn victim who's a little skinless. And it made me heal because it made me make the shift to say, wait, I need to enjoy this. Someone is flying me business class to a fabulous talk show with an unbelievable woman who I would have done anything to meet, with this incredible staff who's just put my entire life together, with hair and makeup, who also is this woman Cheyenne in LA, who's an amazing photographer. Like, why exactly am I making this into a problem? And it shifted me. When I came home, I started doing that with my entire life. you know, um, it's the middle of the night. My husband wakes up frisky. Instead of saying, oh my God, I need to get sleep, I'm like, wait, I need to get sleep so I can enjoy this frisky husband of mine. Like, I started really recontextualizing everything. Why have a hard-boiled egg? Why not make myself a goat cheese omelet? And that's how it works. And I'm sure, and I'm so lucky that happened before tour, because touring is exhausting. You're up at 4 a.m, you're doing 2 events and hair and makeup and this, but I'm going to get to physically hug the people who I have seen online for this last 10 years.
Nice.
Like, why would I make that into an, oh my God, if I'm tired, I'll nap in the car. That's what I've been working on in my life. The way that the ego centers are built is you're born, and ideally, both your genetics, your in utero situation, and your birth situation were models that took, kind of the undifferentiated physical, spiritual blob that is a baby, and began to teach it, oh, this is what unconditional love, nourishment, strong voice, drive, this is what all of that is like. You're safe, so you can experience and develop all of that physiologically, neurologically, and psychologically. But then very soon, you take that and you do something on your own. We don't want to be fed our entire lives only. We also want to develop it. So, for example, the fourth ego center, the heart, you're born, and what you need is that experience of unconditional love. Not that you had a purpose, not that you're a cute baby, but that, wow, you are loved just because you are. And you take that reflection, and then, of course, you want to give it back. And how you give love back is being of worth. How can I love you, world? How can I love you, product? How can I love you, system? And that brings dignity. And what dignity is you don't have to do. Your being brings you worth. Your being is worthwhile. Your being brings you love. And actually, fourth ego center is also very much how we're valued in the marketplace, how we're valued in our relationship. So when everyone started giving so much to me, it really hit my fourth ego center of, am I worth it? Am I of value? Like, like, my father got my mother pregnant during a manic episode, so she couldn't leave him. I mean, they weren't even together. It was, I was born with a purpose. I was not loved unconditionally. I was a utilitarian object. Not that I never got any love or whatever that facsimile was, but that certainly wasn't the purpose of my birth. And so I had it, that in order to get on that plane, in order to engage, in order to let that in, here were people hammering me. with value and love and giving and kindness, like all of these things I was being hammered with. And at a certain point, I let myself break. And the breaking was, okay, wow, let me be here for this. And it took place right before I went on stage. But then here's the great thing about being a human being. When you change something in one area, so let's say all of a sudden you let people value you in your work. I came home and I was able to both value and be valued differently in my relationship. I was able to do that, to say like no to events we usually go to and pick events I wanted to. So I really was able to look at what do I value, because I'm going to have to make choices or I'm going to get way too tired. Like it affects every single area of your life when you make a tiny change in one area. And that's why the prism is so alchemic, dynamic, even magical, because magic is causal. You do things, you don't know why they work, but they do. But we want to prove our magic. Once again, if something requires belief, it probably doesn't work. Belief itself is an incredible tool. Studies on placebo and nocebo effects show that what we believe, which again is part of your prism between conception and age 7, what we believe actually affects us. But if you have to believe in a tool in order for it to have an effect, it's not a tool.
Wow. I spend a lot of time talking about soul, sense of soul. However, I think I've had more people dogging the ego instead of what you've done, really holding it and presenting it in such a beautiful way that it could be when it should be, something that we're working with.
Well,
Thank
doesn't
you.
it break your heart when people don't feel that they can be an I? I
Mhm.
love, I want, I help, I give, I support, I believe, I feel. Those are all ego statements.
Mhm.
If you don't have the idea, you wouldn't be alive if you didn't have an ego. The ego literally is the structure that makes you separate from the oneness of energy. And you can't do anything if you're one with something. I mean, even in relationship, you see people who tend to merge, they find terrible relationships, because even the tendency to do that, you have to be separate to be in relation to something, and it's so important also. Sometimes when I'm irritated, like, I don't know, with my housekeeper because she didn't do something the way I wanted, I remind myself, this is a whole human being. You are a piece of their life. What kind of piece do you want to be? And when you realize that actually everything, if energy is one, everything is a part of you, how you support your environment and also how you demand that you're supported, which end up being one and the same, very important to the kind of life that you live.
It's just something so obvious, but I'm just seeing it now that I'm talking to you because how are you going to have that oneness without the ego? People literally talk about ego deaths.
Right.
It's never really aligned with me because I was like, well, if you kill your ego, how are you going to function in life?
That's right. I mean, ego is I. There is no ego. There is no ego death. I forget what they call it, a spiritual bypass, which is how we get cult leaders and dead followers and people who are abused. But the ego is really, if you think of it, it's not just it's taking responsibility. So it's saying, I do want. I will create. I do represent. And by the way, I might change. Part of the problem of writing books is that you say things at 30 you may not agree with at 66. But it is being responsible for your part on in the world and your part in spirit. But it's also the ability to allow other people to connect with you. Other people, nobody was prouder than my friend who set up this amazing miracle at having given this to me. You know, it allows us to be of value to one another. I mean, ego is I, but I is also what makes donations at the end of the year, what, helps somebody with their bags on the street, what meant the person who mentors a student. A person is an I. Without an ego, that mentor doesn't exist. It's really critically important to have an I. People who don't have an I that's strong are parasitic, because you need an I in order to receive, but you also need an I in order to give.
Well, I'll tell you what, I need this book. And I did see that you had it also available in Audible.
I do, in Audible and digital.
Yeah, I like to clean and listen. So, I can't wait to read your book. This is beautiful. I'm very curious. I'll have to let you know after I start, applying the practices.
Well, I always say to people, the way that I love people to use the book, I almost wanted to put it on the very front page before they even got to the title, was pick one problem, go to that center, and there's a chart really in the beginning of the book that shows you where that problem is located, which center it is. Go to that center in the chapters, do one of the things for a few days and notice the change, because then your subconscious will be on board to really put much more gas in using the rest of it.
I can see that. I can see how that would happen. And for me, taking one thing rather than just going in and saying, hopefully all 30 of my problems get solved. It's a
But
lot.
you know what? You solve one and you solve all 30.
Yeah.
Because when you
Okay.
strengthen one part of you, your system, when you achieve in one part of your life, you have the option to use that for all the parts.
Mm.
You make enough money doing something you love, you can afford good health care, you can afford massages, you can put your child through college, you have the time to go and enjoy your relationship or find one. Like that one tiny change makes a lot of them. For me, being partnered when I met my husband, wow, life got so easy all of a sudden. Like all of these problems, all of the ego centers, a lot of that went away. And then I got a set of new ones that made me grow to the next level.
I like that. And and I have a worth thing too, very common. And everything you were saying, I was really relating to. And it's something that I feel even after I feel like I've accomplished it, sometimes it comes back.
Oh, absolutely. If you don't, so the reason that, and you'll see when you do the book, each ego center, it's a growth chart. And if you don't have the foundation, then even if you create it, it is not stable. So it's really important when you're having a difficulty or you want to achieve something, to find the ego center and go back and say, okay, so for example, at the sixth ego center, which is observation, you were born with a right to be safe enough to just observe, to not have to make intellectual decisions about it. That is not true of all babies, but that was your birthright. If you didn't have that, then forming intellect, you formed a defensive intellect, and you formed a poor intellect because you weren't able to observe everything you needed to take in to have a rich intellect, even if you're super smart. And then only after you formed intellect should you have been able to leave your own ideas and form intuition, because intuition otherwise interferes with the I of your own intellect, or the your perspective of your own observations. So what happens is you go back and you observe, and that's a lot of the lifelong work I've had to do. I can be in a room. I actually couldn't tell you what's in my own living room. That's how unobservant I am. I have worked really hard to be more observant, to be in this time zone, not be a year in the future, not be noticing what's going to happen to someone in a week, but to be mindful is what they call it. And it's really funny because I'm always in the future. That's what I do for a living. I predict the future for companies. And my husband taught mindfulness. He's a screen and TV writer, but his little secret, which is not a secret anymore because he has a big mouth wife, is that he taught this Gurdjieffian mindfulness for decades. He's a master at it. And which, by the way, he didn't tell me. I'm like, excuse me, you're dating a psychic and it took over a year for you to tell me that you teach this mindfulness meditation? Like, what's your problem? But we've been great teachers for each other because he tends to be a little too mindful and not plan. And I tend to, I'll walk into a wall because I know the door will be open tomorrow, but it's not open yet. And it would be smart to be aware of that. So really, we have the opportunity to heal those things again by simple things like, let me look around this room and notice what is here. Let me just take a moment to do that. It will change my entire life.
Yeah. Mindfulness saved my life too. That was the beginning of my journey. But for myself, it was the thoughts that were going through my head. And as much as I tried to get them to go away, it wasn't until I listened to them. And that was like the most success of my mindfulness class that I went to. And I thought I was a complete failure.
Well, there's a wonderful way to deal with things like that, which is it's a form of mediumship, and it's called the symptom dialogue. And it's where you let the problem be in front of you, and not everyone's visual, but you have the problem in front of you, whether it's a physical problem or something like fear or a rupture in a relationship, but you let the problem be in front of you. And then you notice what it's like. What does it look like? What does it smell like? If I will make this rupture, I'll allow it to be something. And then you say to it, what do you need? This is what I want. What do you need? And you allow yourself to take that in. You dialogue with the symptom, because we are loving beings. There is no symptom in our life, no matter how horribly no matter how much trouble we make in trying to fix it. Some of us try to fix it by bullying. Bullying is it's a third ego center issue. It's trying to fix powerlessness. The goal is right. The methodology isn't too sophisticated, but we are loving beings. If we have a symptom, it's trying to help us do something. When we find out, when we dialogue, when we listen to what that thing is, often it goes away. But again, if you have a goal, you're going to meet that symptom anyway. You are going to listen to it, because if you can't listen to it, you can't fix it. But it doesn't mean sitting in it. There's a lot of find your trauma. Your trauma's there. You don't need to look for it. Find your problems. Your problems are there. They're right there. They exhibit themselves in life challenges. You don't need to look for them. You need to look for your goals and deal with
Like
the
I
rest.
said, I'm sorry. I like how you said they'll be the first guests that arrive.
Yep. First guest at the party.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Laura, thank you so very much for joining me. You're so wise, and I think that you just blew my mind, actually. I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you so much. I'm on Instagram at Laura Day Intuit many mornings or afternoons, depending on your time zone. And we exchange readings. We always work on one part of the prism together, because working together empowers us. And lauraday.com has events. I'm doing a lot of events touring for this book, and I certainly hope everyone will show up, because there is something very powerful
Hmm.
working together as a physical group. We entrain with each other, and we act upon each other as catalysts and healers. Again, you can't think outside the box, you are the box. But when you're together in community, especially with the intention of healing, even for an hour, wonderful things can happen.
Sense of soul.